Welcome to Fauna's Charity Sizzle Report. Celebrate the power of giving and discover who is making a difference, what's working in the world of fundraising and philanthropy, and how you too can learn to do it firsthand from those in the know. I am Fauna Hodel, here on the Amazing Women and Men of Power Network, awoptalk247.com. My goodness, today I have a powerful lady, Tadia Rice, a humanist, and she's normally out there raising money, making a difference and paying it forward. And I invited her on my show today because she truly has something very important that she must attend. And before I say one word about her, Tadia, you are going to share what your goal is. Welcome to the world.
Thank you. Aloha, Fauna. So good to be with you.
Thank you so much. Share with us why this is so important. Just share, because that date's coming up very soon.
Yes, it is. It is very, very soon. I have a rather unique background, and that is how Nelson Mandela and South African apartheid affected this American girl, who hailed from Arizona. It's quite funny how patterns in life seem to connect. I've been invited to return to South Africa for the April 27th, 20th anniversary of the historic first ever democratic elections that occurred in 1994. And in 1994, I had been invited as an international observer to those elections, which I did attend and subsequently stayed, and finally decided to move to South Africa. And so I spent the next 15 years helping nation build in that country, and then 5 years ago returned to the United States and made my home in Hawaii.
I mean, wow. So now tell us, like, when you've been invited to return, and what's your goals with all of this? I understand you're writing a book.
I am. I'm writing a book about actually my memoirs with Africa, with Nelson Mandela, with how his lessons on life intersected in so many ways with concepts of Hawaiian aloha, African Ubuntu, many working philosophies of indigenous peoples in the modern world. And, of course, Nelson Mandela affected, everybody on the planet, but me especially, because as an adolescent I first learned about him when he was convicted along with the rest of the Rivonia trialists, never knowing when I was 15 years old that I would end up meeting him over and over and being with him and meeting the rest of the men who were in prison with him. It's just amazing. So it's very meaningful for me to have gone in 94, which was my first trip there, to watch freedom and democracy really be installed in a place that was so devastated by racism, a form of apartheid that was just hideous, and now to be invited back. The only problem is I'm usually raising money for other groups, and now I'm actually forced to raise money for myself because the airfare alone to go from Hawaii to South Africa, which is almost literally the polar opposite of the globe, is so expensive. So I've put out a GoFundMe page at GoFundMe.com, and I'm asking people to help me this time to raise money so I can pay the ridiculous airfares and get to South Africa for this, again, historic event.
And in such a short time. And I know your articles appeared in the Los Angeles Times, Working Woman Magazine, Black Enterprise Magazine, and Enterprising Women Magazine in South Africa. You've authored Breaking Into the Boys Club, a compelling personal account of your life experience as the only female in an all-male business environment. In the midst of a miracle, an uplifting story of her first decade in South Africa and the post-genocide testament, from horror to hope, tragedy to triumph, the women of Rwanda. Oh, my goodness. You certainly have to be there in the time element. Give us the information about Go Fund It so we have people all over the world tuning in, and how can they help?
GoFundMe.com is a remarkable site, and that is where you'll find Tadia Rice. So you go to GoFundMe.com and you look for Tadia Rice. You put in my name, and I should come up, and my story about human rights work with South Africa as well as Namibia, and, of course, across the U.S., and the purpose and the reason for trying to raise money so I can afford to go to South Africa. I need at least $5,000 for my airfare, if you can believe it. It's just ridiculous. But it's a lot of flying. It's basically literally a 2 to 3 day travel each way. So that's how you find me, GoFundMe.com, and then you put in my name, Tadia Rice.
Spell your name.
Tadia, and then my last name is Rice.
And, of course, your goal is to complete your book, and I'm sure that and then people can order your book. They'll be able to read this book, of course.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, when people contribute to my fund to complete the book, I send them a copy of the book cover and a few other little samples of writing and a little bookmark gift. The reason it's so important for me to be in South Africa for this event is to complete the interviews that I had not been able to get being so far away. I have so many interviews of those who were imprisoned with Madiba, Nelson Mandela, and they're all getting old, and, they're 70s and 80 years old now, and many have already died, and so I want to get their reflections of the time they spent on Robben Island with him, and, the various prisoners that were there. One of my friends ended up being the youngest prisoner ever in Robben Island. He was 14 years old, just happened to see a group gather, walked over to see what the group was, and he was arrested and thrown into prison. And his story is quite remarkable, and he's now one of the biggest businessmen in South Africa. And the stories just go on and on. It's truly a place of great inspiration, and I've been very motivated by the stories, not just of Africa, but certainly in terms of South Africa, what people endured and how people have overcome. It's a lesson in life for all of us, and Nelson Mandela certainly typified many of the aspects of aloha and Ubuntu, and if we can live a life like his, we will have a peaceful world. We will move everything forward.
Now, what was your first encounter with Mandela?
That was interesting. There were so many times that we were together, but I couldn't talk to him. When he was released from prison, the first place he went to was Namibia in March of 1990. He'd been released in February. I had been involved in the Namibian independence celebrations when the UN literally kicked South Africa out of what was then called Southwest Africa, also under apartheid. And they said, it's time, this needs to be a new country. So Southwest Africa then became Namibia. And how I got there is a story in and of itself. But I was there to help produce that show for the first ever president of the new country of Namibia. And, of course, he was there. And he was there with de Klerk, who had been the president at the time. They both were given the Nobel Peace Prizes that year. And so we saw each other. We looked at each other. I was on the opposite side of the space, and we watched the South African flag lowered, the old one, and the new Namibian flag rise. So that was the first time I saw him, and we smiled and acknowledged each other. There would be 3 more times that would occur before I could actually talk with him, touch him, be hugged by him, speak with him.
Chills.
and that was on Robben Island in 1999, the night of the shift into the 21st century.
Now, I know, having met you, you're a strong-willed woman, and there you were in a country that was so backwards. And how was that for you? And then to see Mandela freed and just that shift, there you were in the middle of it all.
Well, I would not necessarily say it was backward. South Africa is very first world in many ways.
Mm-hmm.
The problem was that the privileges were reserved.
Oh, yeah, so that's terrible, yes.
So it was a joy to watch as Africans were now able to participate and go to restaurants and go to places that they were never allowed to go to before. And I played a role in that, in helping train young Africans who were taking over the positions that belonged to the older white men. And that was very interesting because everybody had to make a mental shift. The older white men had to recognize they had to either lose their job or learn how to work with a young, typically black woman, an African woman.
Wow.
So there were so many cultural, political, emotional, and mental transformations that had to occur. Working with people to do that was very interesting. I grew in the process.
What was the energy of all of that? And, of course, you'll be writing about that, but what an interesting time period.
You know, the South Africans are in many ways ahead of America in terms of dealing with race issues.
Uh-huh.
They're very open. They'll say, hey, look, I'm an Afrikaner. I was raised, you were my servants, you were my workers. You know, you were not my equal, and now you're my equal, and I don't know what to do with that.
Wow.
And Africans would say, well, you know, I don't hate you, and you fear me, but you have no reason to fear me. I'm not going to drive you into the ocean like you used to think if Africans took over an African country. And there would be very blunt, honest, authentic discussions about how people felt about the paradox of the nation. I mean, they were making history. They were living history, and I got to participate in that.
And how many years did you stay there during that time period, did you say?
Yeah, about 15 years.
Whoa.
I only came back to Hawaii 5 years ago.
Now, what brought you back here?
Well, a host of issues. Children, a desire to get to Hawaii and kind of get out of the weather. You know, being a foreigner in a foreign country has its ups and has its downs. And politically, the winds were shifting in South Africa. And I felt I'd really made my contribution.
Yes.
So, but I'm the kind of person who likes to pay it forward, and I believe that as you serve and as you give, you end up getting. So when I got to Hawaii, I, of course, jumped full on into the culture that I loved, and I've been very involved in affairs locally here.
And that's who you are, inside out. Now, this book that you're working on, how far into it are you?
I'm about 80% of the way.
Yes. So this trip is very, very important. Once again, and how long do you plan on being away? And let's put a number out there that you want to raise.
I will be gone for 2 months, which will give me ample time, A, for the travel, and B, to spend time getting the interviews that I need that really will close the book, because now it's a 20-year capsule of time that I will be documenting from a perspective of, yes, I'm an American woman of color, but not really. It's like a humanist perspective. It'll be written from different perspectives. More so how Nelson Mandela has taught the lessons that he taught, and how he did it. And, it covers a lot of things. It covers Rwanda. It covers global issues. It covers, how does a person that's born in one place in the world end up in another place in the world. And I think one of the most important factors that I want to clarify to the reader is that you never know who you're going to be, and you never know who you are meeting, who they will become. Because when I was a businesswoman in Los Angeles, working for Xerox Corporation, very corporate, I would meet these young South Africans in exile, and they might sleep on my floor, they might need a meal, or they might need some money for bus fare as they were attending college and they couldn't go home. And then to realize that these same individuals are now the people who are leading the country.
Wow.
And helping. And who could have ever thought? I never knew I'd be living there. I never knew that they would become leaders.
Amazing. Now let's talk about, for our listening audience, more about you and your background. I understand you were in the entertainment world also at one point.
I have been there too.
Wow.
Yes, I had a music drama that I toured for 10 years. And when I wrapped that show, which was about the first woman of Persia to ever unveil her face in front of men, and this was only in the 1800s, not very long ago, when I retired the show, I decided I would start a nonprofit that would educate women around the world, girls and women who were agents of change, like Tadia was. That was the name of this woman. And she left a body of poetry and writings behind, and I was very fortunate to get the rights to the English translations. Took her story. I created music to the poetry, and then it became a music drama and toured for 10 years all over. And in the 12 years, 14 now, that the nonprofit has existed, we've been able to educate 22 girls and women around the world from almost, so many different ethnic groups and geographic areas. So I raise money for that too.
let's give your site on that, just for anyone who wants to look you up.
Well, I can be looked up in a host of places. The Tadia Association, TAHIRIH Association, one word, .org, is the nonprofit that gives educational scholarships to girls and women around the world. My professional website is TadiaRice.com, and the GoFundMe site is GoFundMe.com, Tadia Rice.
Yes. Now, is there an email if someone wanted to ask you questions? Will you give your email address?
Sure, I'm very happy to. It's TadiaRice@gmail.com.
And that's Tadia, and then, of course, Rice, RICE.
That's correct.
Yes. Well, since this trip is so important, let's really focus on that again. Let's give an example of, I know you've been sharing snippets of the story, so is there anything you'd like to share? We probably have about 10 minutes left before we wrap it up, and I'd really like the listening audience to understand the importance of this trip. And it takes a village to raise a child, and it takes a team of people to help raise some money and to make sure you're over there in time.
Oh, thank you, Fauna. I so appreciate that. There are so many stories. I think one of the most powerful things that ever happened to me was after all of the times that I was with Nelson Mandela, in social circumstances, in political scenarios, in situations where he was being honored. It was on Robben Island at the Millennium that night. I was the only American, and there was about 300 individuals who were invited to Robben Island, and they were the prisoners who'd spent time in that prison that has now, of course, become a museum. And everybody was there. It was dark. It was meaningful, and at midnight, Madiba went into his cell and lit a candle for world peace, and we all witnessed that. And it was at that time, finally, after all the looks and the smiles and the acknowledgments, that I was able to actually speak with him, and he embraced me so warmly, so lovingly. And, of course, I thought in my mind, when I finally do get a chance to talk to him, what shall I say? You're a great man. Thank you for influencing my life. Thank you for showing me how humanity can be the best of itself. And I was absolutely speechless.
Wow.
First of all, he was a big man. He has a stature about him, but a humility that was as powerful as his stature. And he hugged me and he said, thank you for all you've done. And I melted. And this is an effect that he had on many people.
Yes, yes.
When someone's so great and then they thank you and you feel you are nobody compared to them. And it taught me a lesson that you always have to remain humble, and he did.
You know, I know Alfre Woodard very well, and when she had played that role, you know, of Winnie Mandela, and she would later, you know, get to know the family very well and meet Nelson Mandela, and just the love that comes out of her whenever she says his name. So it feels like that's the type of impact you just melt in front of him.
It's true, and Alfre and I have been at several things together as well. And, you know, we know the same people that were involved in the anti-apartheid movement and the entertainment crowd that contributed so well, you know, to helping raise visibility and knowledge about apartheid. But it is true, Nelson Mandela was, I just can only say, I think he was a saint. I don't know how anyone who can spend 27 years in prison, and I've seen the various cells he was in, and I've seen the mines that those men had to dig for all those years, and how you come, and I was there when he voted. I was with him when he cast his ballot in 1994, and what he said after he cast his ballot, and the whites of South Africa were terrified, and they thought surely they were all going to be killed, and he said, do not leave. Please stay. You have a role in this country. You are South Africans. You're of this land just as much as anyone else. And that nobody expected. Many people thought, okay, the hammer's going to come down and politically things are going to be very dramatically changed. And it was a transition that was peaceful and kind. And for the 4 days of the election that the voting took place, I witnessed miracle after miracle.
Now, at what stage did you decide that you were going to write this book?
I have been writing this book in one form or another for many years, since 1994. And I think that it finally took, knowing his impending death, that I had to really, this was it. The book had to conclude. I had to find the focus of it and combine all the stories that I had witnessed and give it a point and give it a conclusion.
So now you're invited back to South Africa to attend the 20th anniversary of those historic elections. So we have to make sure that you're there. Once again, give that website address so people can know how to help you. Feel Tadia's heart, know how important it is. Just like she's helped others, it's her time, and on this short notice, to make sure that she's there for this very special time. So give the information again. GoFundMe.com, and on that site you put in my name, Tadia Rice, and you make your contribution. It's very painless and easy. I was very impressed with this website, and that's why I'm using it. And it's safe and sound, of course.
Very safe, yes. You can pay in a host of ways. And, you know, I raised about a third of the money already just within probably 3 weeks. I am so grateful and honored that so many people have believed in me.
Yes, and we're going to make sure that you have what you need to be there. This is very important, and you can get that book finished. And we all have to help each other. If more people in this world would reach out and give a helping hand, that's actually why I do the show, Fauna's Charity Sizzle Report, to honor people that pay it forward. And to learn more about my show, you go to faunahodel.net, FAUNAHODEL.net. I am building a new website, but for now I do have a handful of wonderful people that I've interviewed who pay it forward from all walks of life. And Tadia, we will have to have you back on the show again on the Amazing Women and Men of Power Network and tell more about you. This show was focused on making sure that you raise the money that you need. So take just a minute or two and wrap it up, whatever your heart feels. Speak to the listening audience all over this world.
Oh, thank you, Fauna. And what you are doing is indeed important. I think these good news stories are valuable so that people remain encouraged and optimistic about the world. As difficult as things may seem at times, really there are miracles every moment if we just choose to see them. I do a little bit of work in the women's prison in Hawaii, and my women do what they call God hunting, and they go hunting for God every day, and they look for the little ways that God does something good in somebody's life, and they taught me that, and so now I know I go God hunting myself. So all I could say, I guess, to wrap this up is I will continue to hunt and find the things and the grace and the beauty of this world and honor everyone that I meet, and I hope that my book will give inspiration to others who have not had the experiences I've been so privileged to enjoy. So I thank everyone who is willing to help. Bless you very much. In Hawaii we say, anu ai ko alahele. May your way be blessed.
Well, ask and you shall receive. I'm holding the vision that the money just comes in from every direction and from where you even least expect it. So blessings and aloha, and thank you for being on my show, Fauna's Charity Sizzle Report, on the amazing Women and Men of Power Talk Radio at awoptalk247.com. Thank you. Aloha.
Aloha.